15 years ago, we started Transition Garden. It's a way to use a garden to build community, to build additional strength of local control over what's going on in the outside world. Communities working more closely together, working on food production, which is important, of course, to everyone, and a way to really build that community empowerment.
Garden grows through the seasons that flow. Our garden grows, our garden grows.
With the Transition Garden, we really like broccoli. A lot of people that help here in the gardens, they all want to take some home, cook it up in a whole lot of different ways. And, you know, let's face it, Grandma said, eat your broccoli, because it's good for you. It really is. So we like to have our broccoli, and we want to make sure that there's always some broccoli all the way through the season. So that's why it's important to plan ahead and not just plant one crop of broccoli, but think about what the next crop's going to be and have successional plantings of broccoli somewhere in your garden. We do the same thing with radishes. Every couple of weeks, tiny little row somewhere, we put in some radishes. That way you've always got something fresh coming on in its prime, ready to pick. With the broccoli here now, here's a good example of 3 different stages of broccoli. So this was the first planting, went in the ground in early May, I think. So it's now about 6 weeks later, 5-6 weeks. Just starting to form broccoli heads in here. And in another week or so, we'll start having the very first harvest of broccoli. But we're not going to stop there. We're already planning ahead. Here's a tray that was started back about a month ago, 5 weeks ago maybe. And we've got some beautiful broccoli transplants that we're going to be putting into a different part of the garden. There's a beautiful broccoli transplant, which is going to be the second crop of broccoli. And that'll be ready in about a month's time, 5 weeks, somewhere in there. And we're planning ahead beyond that. So not only do we have a second crop of broccoli, but we've got a seed tray here, and they're just starting to come up out of the ground, more broccoli. So this is going to be more like a midsummer, late summer crop of broccoli. And we'll be doing the same thing right into the fall. So we may be harvesting different ages of broccoli all the way through, right up until November, well into the fall. And with broccoli, just one thing to keep in mind. You're primarily harvesting the flower bud. And the broccoli plant's going to make one big bud at the top. That's the broccoli head. So we're going to cut that. But then if you leave the plant there, all of those side buds are going to come up and they're going to form mini heads. So you get a second harvest out of every broccoli plant. So we'll be harvesting the main head in another week or so, and we'll let the plant stay, and it's going to produce those mini side heads of broccoli, get a second harvest, and then we'll be pulling the plants out, refreshing the beds, and putting something else in there. You gotta love the garlic. The crop's coming along really well. We picked the scapes off, the curly tops. We cut those off maybe a week and a half ago. Scape pesto, grilled scapes. We've been cooking with them regularly. A lot of good uses for those. Now the crop is starting to ripen up. First telltale sign is the leaves are starting to brown up at the tips. This time of year, the days are starting to get shorter. We're past the summer solstice, longest day of the year. Days are starting to get shorter. Garlic can tell. It says this is the time to start bulking out that bulb, that garlic bulb. That's where it's got to store its energy. Days are getting shorter, it can tell. It says, okay, let's start storing. So this is where we're getting the bulking out of those bulbs. It's a good time of year. We're going to be pulling these plants out of the ground in about 2 more weeks. By then, these leaves are going to be much more brown down, much less ability to photosynthesize and produce more energy into those bulbs. So by then it's time to really start to pull the whole plant out, and then we're going to start curing those bulbs for storage. But let's pull one out, have a look, see how they're doing at this point. I'm going to reach in there, find a nice one, pull it out of the ground, and let's see what we got. Now there is a nice garlic plant coming right along. Look at that bulb. Starting to fatten up. That's what we want to see. Now, interesting thing with garlic, each of these leaves come all the way down and they form a skin around that bulb. So you've got, what, maybe 8 layers of skin around the bulb. And then inside are the newly formed cloves, the garlic cloves. That's, of course, the part that you're going to eat. So when we cure this plant, we're going to be drying those leaves, those skins around the outside of the bulb, get them good and dry. The flavor intensifies as part of the curing process. We're going to be reducing the moisture in there. They call this, in the garlic world, they call the roots now, when they're all dried up, the beard. So we'll keep the beard on for a while. Eventually we're going to cut that off. We'll keep the stem on for a while when we're curing. That's going to help to pull moisture out of the bulb. And then eventually we'll cut that off as well. This is an important crop for any grower. You got to have some for yourself, cooking all year long. You got to be able to have some for gifts. People love garlic homegrown as a gift at Christmas time, Thanksgiving, that whole fall season. And you got to have some for bartering with your friends, swapping. What? It doesn't matter. Seeds, that kind of thing. Well, hey, I'll give you some garlic. You give me something you've got, that type of thing. That's a nice plant. Mamma mia. Here we are back in the big greenhouse. Beautiful radicchio. I'm going to talk a little bit about the radicchio. But first, let me point out something really important. Look at that. That is called a Canadian tomato steak. Actually, they work great. We get them from all the hockey players. You cut off the blade, but the handle, it's all laminated, it's impregnated with epoxy, they last forever. We've got a beautiful crop of radicchio. Radicchio is an interesting plant, not all that well known in North America. People in Europe love it. It's a, I think of it somewhere between lettuce and cabbage. They form heads, at least this variety does. That's most of what you will find in grocery stores and in markets, is the head type of radicchio. Some of it will just form leaves, and that's what people like to have, is just the leaves. Slightly bitter taste. These are growing out very nicely. What I do is I pinch the head and just get a sense for how full, how firm the head is. And then that tells me they're ready to harvest. So this one here is actually a good one. I'm going to cut it off right at the base. And then what I'm going to do is we just start to take off some of the outside leaves. And as you do that, you start to get to the inside, that purple radicchio head that people are familiar with when they go to the grocery store. Look at that. So that's almost like a cabbage head, fairly tight. And we're going to cook this. We're going to put it in salads, do a lot of different things with it. So there's a very nice radicchio. It's late June, our first picking of the year of radicchio. And so what we've done, we've got successional planting. This was the very first crop we planted back in April. So we're harvesting it now. We've planted small transplants just last week in the other garden bed. So that's going to be a summer crop that we'll start to harvest in August. Then we'll plant a third crop, which we'll harvest in the fall, in October and November. I'll cut another one here. So we've got a few of them to work with and do some cooking. There's another one, and you can see it looks almost like a head of lettuce. And then you peel off the outside leaves. You can actually eat the outside leaves. They're tough, more bitter, and people cook with them. But I'm going to peel them off, in this case, most of the outside leaves, and get to that inner head, which is a little more tender. And then we'll bring that up to the kitchen, be able to do some cooking.
I like it hot in the summer and hot in the spring. I never want it to get cold. You fool me into thinking that I could be singing when the weather's not like that at all. Oh, 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 oh.
In the Transition Garden and with the Transition community, we encourage people to have a workshop. It's a place where you can repair things, you can build things. It gives you a lot more flexibility and resiliency when you're running your home, you're running your garden, you're helping out in the neighborhood with things that just need to be fixed, things that need to be built. So it's a good idea to slowly assemble a good workshop and do it economically. Wait for things to go on sale, figure out what you need, start with a little bit of this, a little bit of that, depending on what your budget will allow. Now, real basic stuff with the garden, of course, you're going to need a rake and you're going to need a shovel. And of course, with most things, just same thing with tools, a lot of different kinds of each. So let's talk for a minute just about shovels. The type of shovel that we use the most in the Transition Garden, it's got a pointed tip. That's good because it allows you to cut into the soil, cut through roots. You can pry rocks loose, small rocks, stones that are in the soil, that type of thing. It's just a good, all-round, good purpose working tool. It's got a fairly long handle. We like the type with just an end like this without a handle on top. You can get some that are just half as length of a handle and they've got a handle there. That's a different type of a shovel. There's some types that you'll find that have a flat top. It's good for shoveling some things, more loose material, fine soil, gravel, that sort of thing. But you're not going to be able to cut into the soil if you've got a flat top. So they're a little more difficult to use. So get some advice. Pick out some good tools, treat them well, oil it once in a while, keep it out of the rain, don't leave it outside for weeks on end, and it should last quite a long time. And don't abuse it. Don't try to use it as a pry bar and get big boulders out of the soil because you're going to bust it for sure. So just treat your tools well and they'll last a long time and they'll give you good economical use. So just do a real quick piece on a rake. This is a real basic rake that we use all the time in the Transition Garden. It's got good strong teeth. It's good for leveling the soil after you've turned it over with a shovel, removing small stones off the top, weeds, whatever it might be. Just a good all-purpose rake. And I use both sides of the rake. I'll use the teeth, for example, when I try to comb and groom the soil and level it. And then I'll use the backside if I'm really going to be using kind of a very fine leveling at the end before we're going to do seeding and really doing some fine work. So I use both sides of the rake. This is a good common rake. Of course, there's a lot of other types. There's leaf rakes. You could probably find 6, 8, 10 different kinds of rakes in the store. Same thing on quality. Look for what you think is economical. Good, strong metal here. Good attachment to a good hardwood handle. So just look for sturdiness, and I think you'll get an economical purchase. So one of the things we like to do is start some toolboxes with various items in them. So in this case, we've got brackets and we've got bolts. So just a lot of different kinds of brackets that pick them up from the hardware store when things are on sale. And you've got brackets of all kinds of shapes and sizes ready to go when you might need them. Same thing with bolts. We've got all kinds of sizes and shapes of bolts in here that we can use as needed. So it's just nice to have things like that around in a good workshop. I want to show you some of my favorite tools, some of which can get quite pricey, but they're not just, say, my tool or the neighbor's tool. It's the whole community's tool. So we all get to use it. We all get to share in the cost and the benefits of the tool.
Okay.
So what I'd like to show you now is a fairly high-end tool, and it's used by the whole transition community. This is a precision 6-row seeder, and it costs probably about $600. But it's an excellent way to seed beds, either in a greenhouse or outdoors, with very fine precision for things like carrots, beets, kale, all kinds of seeds. Get them into nice, close rows, very close spacing, very precision seeding level so that they come up with uniform germination, and you get beautiful looking beds that way. All kinds of adjustments available. It's got 6 compartments for seeds. There's a axle here that turns and takes 1 seed at a time, drops it into these furrow plow blades here, which is creating the opening in the soil for the seeds to drop in. You can adjust just about everything. Beautiful tool, an example of a shared tool in the transition community. It's an example of, I bought this tool and it's used by 2-3 other gardeners. Similarly, they bought tools that I get to use. So it's kind of this mutual investment and sharing arrangement. So I'd like to introduce you to my second most favorite tool, which is the knife hoe. This is a very nice type of a hoe. Good stainless steel head, and it's sharp all the way around all 3 sides, just like a knife. And the way it's used is you put it down level on the ground, and you can go around among the weeds and you actually just cut off the weeds where they come out of the ground. It works very well. It's quick, simple. You can maneuver in and out of your crop plants very easily. It's got a nice long handle, so you can reach quite far into some beds. Works beautifully. Now my third tool that is my favorite in the transition garden is the all-purpose multi-tool. I keep one on my hip pretty well all the time because you're wandering around doing stuff. You never know when you're going to need just, like, say, a basic pair of pliers. You might need a knife blade. All of the various things that you get in a good multi-tool. I like to keep my knife blade sharp. And then it's got other things in there as well. It's got a, even a little tiny pair of scissors. I mean, multi-tools, you can find all kinds of things. This one's got a tiny little saw, which is really nice, if I need to prune something off on a fruit tree, that type of thing. And then of course, the pièce de résistance is the corkscrew. There you go. Because you know, when you got those grapes and they've gone into the wine bottle.
So let me tell you about one of my favorite tools. This little thing here is called a homi. It's a Korean tool, or it's originally a Korean design. It's about a 5,000-year-old tool. Not this one, although it looks pretty old. The design's been around for about 5,000 years, and it's kind of like a little bit of a plowshare. You can see that it's got a curve to it, it's got a sharpened edge here, it's got a thin edge here, and it's got a concave part here, which allows you to do a lot with it. It's got a nice curve in the handle, so it's fairly ergonomic. And I use this all the time. I use this for everything, for weeding, for planting, for breaking ground. This has this great action. You can really thunk it into the soil. You can make a big deep pull on it, so you can see how that's really good for opening up new soil. And then if you use it backwards, use this flat piece, you can actually push everything around. And if you take care of it and you sharpen the edge, you can actually use it as a good kind of weeding tool, so you can cut it, and with this kind of back and forth motion, you can just cut all the roots off the weeds. I like to use it a lot for planting because you can do it pretty quickly, and it allows you to get a nice hole in the ground. So I've got some lettuce transplants here that are a little bit dried out, but we'll look after that in a bit. So they're a bit root bound, so I want to break them up a bit on the edge. And then I just use the tool to, well, I use my hands a lot too. Yeah, so you can plant things in different ways. If I was planting seeds, I just use it, drag along and make a row in here. But seeing as how I'm planting transplants, I want to make a nice little divot in the soil. The nice thing about this is it makes the unlike a shovel or a spade, it leaves the soil in your hole fairly loose. It doesn't give you a harsh, a solid wall on the hole. So I got a few extra interesting old roots in there. Again, this one definitely needs to be let out of its little tiny box. So that's the homi, and I love it. It's my favorite tool.
flow.